I'm now live.
We have a square.
Brother Ruben, welcome. We are live. We'll give a couple minutes and then we'll get started. All right, brother, let's go ahead and get started. For those who are out there joining us today, we definitely want to welcome you back to another episode of P&L TV, where we're in conjunction with the DFW Alphas Social Action Coalition on today. Today, we're presenting our final installment of Know Your Ballot Part 3, where we'll be rounding out some of the later roles on the ballot. We'll be talking through those. But first, let me introduce myself, Brother Bernard Andrews, Voting Lambda Chapter President, and I'll kick it over to my brothers on the panel. Brother Wilson, I'll give you the floor to introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Eric Wilson. I am the chair of the Voteless People as a Hopeless People for Alpha Sigma Lambda.
All right, Brother
Good evening.
Thomas.
My name is Brother Xavier Thomas, and I am a member of Beta Tau Lambda chapter, the Fort Worth chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha.
Good evening, brothers. My name is Ruben Lael. I'm a 2007 initiate of the Beta Sigma chapter at Southern University and a member of Alpha Sigma Lambda chapter here in Dallas.
All right, brothers, welcome and thank you again for joining us on today. We usually start off with any voting tips. Anybody have anything they want to add today? First, have all of you guys early voted?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay.
I would say probably, I'm sorry, brother.
Go ahead.
How about a tip? I just say go vote.
Go vote.
I know the first couple of days there was a mad rush to the polls. There was long lines, but if you go now, you can get in and out really quick. It's a really easy process. So I encourage you, don't wait. Just go ahead and take care of your business now. You don't have to worry about long lines, and as opposed to trying to wait for that one day to try to vote. Right.
Definitely a good point.
You know, I'll add to that. You know, when I went, the line was outside the building, wrapping around the building. That was largely due to social distancing, and it took about 15 minutes to make that entire line. Right, it went real quick.
Yeah, I guess my next example would be you got until the 30th to vote, right? So I would say to what Brother Wilson said, take advantage of this downtime where the lines are small, because if you wait until the third, I'm pretty sure that on the third there'll be a pretty decent line. So take advantage of the low lines right now.
Well, brother Wilson, maybe you can help me answer this. I was talking to my parents yesterday. They're down in Houston, and they had requested their mail-in ballot, and they had mailed it in. And I guess they were told that they needed to put 2 stamps instead of 1. Do you have any comment on that? They said they weren't going to kick it back if it did not reach. My understanding, I thought it was prepaid postage, but apparently it's not. And they said that you have to have at least 2 stamps to get it to where it needs to go.
There's been debate about that. They'll tell you 1 stamp and then they'll tell you 2 stamps. It should be 1 stamp, but just as good measure, people always put 2 stamps. It's already pre-sorted. So if it makes you feel comfortable doing it, I would say you can go ahead and do it.
2 stamp. Got it. Okay. Brother Hawkins, welcome to the chat. I'll give you the floor if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the crowds at home.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Apologies for my tardiness, brother.
It's okay.
Brother Gerard Hawkins, Newtown Number Chapter, Social Acting Chair.
All right. We were just kind of kicking it off. If we had any additional voting tips, we were just talking through, our early voting experiences. Most of us, it seems like we had more of an in and out experience, very, very streamlined. I didn't have any issues. I haven't heard of any specific issues, but did you have anything that you wanted to add to that or your experience with early voting?
No, we actually used the application to see where to vote earlier or the lighter area to vote. So I live up in North Fort Worth area, and one of the main places that we usually just use for early voting and also on the day voting had an hour plus wait. So we ended up using another polling location, which was technically in Houston City, but it was literally like maybe 5 miles away. And that took about right under 30 minutes, right before the rush came. So all in all, it's pretty good. I even had my time about it.
Okay, good deal. Well, I'm glad. I'm very encouraged to see that our panel here is early voted. I hope that those that are watching with us at home in your respective locations have early voted. If you have not, please take advantage of this time that we have, because we want to go ahead and get it done, and we don't want to see any roadblocks. So with that being said, we're going to turn it over to our main discussion for today. The last couple of episodes, we talk about some of the other ballots, what's on the ballot, some of those positions. So today we'll be kind of going through the railroad commissioner, sheriff, tax assessor, tax collector, county commissioner, school board, some of those other elections that are going on depending on your region. So with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Brother Wilson, who will facilitate us through that discussion. It's coming up. There you go. I think you're still on mute.
Thank you. You see my screen? We're good. Okay. All right. Today we'll talk about the Railroad Commission, the State Board of Education, and we'll talk about some of the local offices. We previously discussed the Texas Senate and those candidates and a lot of the Texas offices. So we'll leave those off for today. So we'll go ahead and get started. State Board of Education. We'll get started with this race. The State Board of Education sets the policies and standards for Texas public education or schools. The primary responsibility of the State Board of Education includes setting the curriculum standards, reviewing and adopting instructional materials, establishing graduation requirements, overseeing the Texas Permanent School Fund, appointing the board members to military reserve and special school districts, providing final review of rules proposed by State Board of Education certifications, and reviewing the commissioner's proposed award of new charter schools with authority to veto a recommended applicant. Now, brothers, if you have anything that you want to add to as we go through this, I welcome your comments.
I'll just add that it's my understanding that a lot of states tend to adopt the textbooks and elements of curriculum from Texas State. So this election has an impact on that goes beyond Texas's borders as well.
Yeah. So this board, if you're not satisfied with what we see in the history books, this is the board where this is handled. It is not necessarily handled at your local level, your school district levels. They are just adopting books that's been adopted by the State Board of Education, and they set the curriculum. So the appointed board members, they appoint board members to the military reservation and special school district. They have 4-year terms. There are 15 spots across the state. There are only 2 African Americans on this particular board out of 15. Here are the list of individuals that are vying for those positions. And I'll just show you them as to continue with the tradition of last week, just showing you the representatives who are running, not to show any favoritism towards any individual, remaining neutral, giving them equal, no time. All right. Finally, or next, Texas Railroad Commission. Let's talk about trains. Let's talk about how we get across the state, but not. This title is deceiving. The Texas Railroad Commission has everything to do with the environment and nothing to do with railroads. It structures the way our state regulates oil and gas industry. This is one of the most powerful positions, appointments in the state of Texas, outside the governor, lieutenant governor. 3 seats on the commission. They serve 6-year terms. The Railroad Commission is a state executive agency in the Texas state government. Despite its name, the commission does not regulate railroads, but instead oversees the oil and gas industry, gas utilities, pipeline safety. So if you remember a couple of years ago when Atmos had pipelines blowing up and injuring individuals, this is the department that will take care of that, or should have taken care of that. Safety in liquefied petroleum gas industry and surface coal and uranium mining. Commissioners are elected to 6-year staggered terms with 1 commissioner up for election every 2 years. They also control how much revenue goes into the permanent fund for land grant colleges. So as of January 2017, the commission members, Christy Craddock, chairman, and these the following individuals, all 3 members are Republicans. She was elected in 2012 and reelected in 2018. Sidden was elected in 2014, Christian in 2016. Effective October 1st, 2005, as a result of House Bill 2702, the rail oversight functions of the Railroad Commission were transferred to the Department of Transportation. So the namesake does not fit. The traditional name of the commission was not changed despite the loss of its regulatory duties. I do know that there have been the last couple of sessions efforts to try to rename this commission. All of them have been unsuccessful. I'm not sure if that's going to be a case this year or not. Does anyone have anything they would like to add? All right.
So, quick question for you, brother. Some of the HBCUs in Texas, are they not land grant?
Some of the what? I'm sorry again. Yes.
Some of the HBCUs.
Yes, and this is where they would get their funding, like combination between UT and M Prairie View, their money that they receive from the state, and this is the department or the commission that would control how much revenue goes where. So
That's actually interesting. No, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, so this is their way of contributing or not contributing to some of the schools.
Very important to know.
Very important. So who's running? So here's your list of candidates that are vying for this very important position, despite his name. All right. So let's talk.
I wonder how many jobs are attached to this, branch of, Texas government, and how that plays in Texas kind of really being a huge oil and gas state. And also how that affects climate change, right? So that's a huge issue for a lot of millennials. And it seems like this particular role is responsible for really housing and making the decision on how gas and oil is used in the public and private sector, So Dallas is big business, but, I wonder if, and this is new to me, I had to do my research on this particular race because it was just, not really a well-known or well-researched, type of race, but those were kind of questions that came to mind, when we think about creating jobs, for minorities, right? What avenues aren't we tapping into in terms of, this office and what they're responsible for in terms of, the quality of life and workforce that we could potentially provide, opportunities for members of our community.
You're absolutely right. And like I said, traditionally, this is, it gets very little pub when it comes to campaigning, but it's very powerful in what it does. For example, if you all remember when we were shaking and rumbling a few years ago because of the fracking, this is the agency that deals with that. When they told you that fracking was good, there was nothing wrong with the fact that we've never had earthquakes in this area or to the magnitude that we had, or when there was a big rush to try to siphon as much gas from the Barnett Shale and everyone was making deals. This was the agency that dealt with that. And to think about the number of jobs associated with that and how our current utilities, the provider, the biggest one, TXU and Atmos, how they go about regulating their gas and their usage and how their plants and what plants are built and or not built and where they're built. This is that agency that takes care of that.
And not only that, also with the green, the windmills and the solar systems and the not solar system, but the solar panels.
Solar panels. Mm-hmm.
How they actually enacted a law that because it's actually cheaper for clean energy, but
it is.
There is a tax that they put on it to make it more equal to coal and gas, essentially. So that comes from that particular office.
Wow. And this repeatedly has attacked green energy, has fought tooth and nail to keep it from expanding in Texas, because you can only imagine how much energy can be harnessed from the winds, if not alone from West Texas. But just the idea that we have all this open space for solar energy and the benefits of that. And this agency has fought every chance it could get to make sure that doesn't become prevalent, even to the point of limiting. We talk about electric cars and all that. They're involved in it and making sure that you keep going to the gas pump as opposed to charging your vehicle.
Yeah. And, along those lines, one thing to also, for the folks listening, it's very important to do your research on these particular candidates. Some of them, they market themselves as, businessman and rancher, attorney and software engineer. A lot of these candidates are connected to the oil and gas industry, so the business in businessman, for example, is the oil and gas business. And, the attorney and software engineer is oil and gas attorney. So that speaks to both the experience of the candidates and their motivation for running. So you may want to check out whether or not your motivations are aligned with theirs.
I like that. I like that because that was something that really popped out to me when I saw this slide. It's just the titles of industry that are behind their names, and basically what you said, what's motivating them, and what sector of the industry, do they have connections with. So yeah, that's cool.
Very good. All right, so let's drop down. Let's drop down a little closer to home. And we all are probably more familiar with these races than we are with some of the state and national offices. So, local level of government, we're talking about city, state, and county offices. We're familiar with the mayor, city council, and school board. This particular election, due to COVID-19, pushed some of those races back to November. They would primarily have been held in May. Your local city council and some school board, and depending on what city, mayoral races as well. So the mayor is the highest ranking official in a municipal government, such as that of a city or town. As executive officer, the mayor administers oath and signs all motions, resolutions, and ordinances passed by the city council. The mayor also serves as legislative function, presiding over the city council with voting privileges. Oftentimes, they serve 2 to 4 years, depending on the city. City council, 2 is diverse, serves as the legislative body in the city of Dallas and other surrounding cities. In particular, Dallas has 14 members. The city of Dallas has a weak mayor form of government, but it is run, the main person, the CEO who runs the city, is actually the city manager. And the council and mayor are the policy makers. Okay, council members are also chosen by plurality elections. In other words, they're elected by single member districts, depending on the city. Some are at large, but for the most part, they're individual. And I believe Grand Prairie and maybe Arlington, do they have at large members? Or are they single district? Okay. All right. The city operates under, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So again, the city runs on the city manager form of government. In other words, this person is in charge of all the city personnel. All right. So these are towns that are voting in November. And what you'll see is you may see some council elections. Primarily, you'll see that when an individual is running uncontested and those cities deem it not necessary to have an election, that person will win by default. Okay, some more cities that are voting in November. Typically, cities don't like to vote in November because it brings out more people to vote. They like the low turnout in May. And this is just an example of the different single member districts in Dallas. So school board is another election that was affected by COVID, and there are some races that are pushed back to November. Board members are elected to 4-year terms or 2-year terms to fill a vacancy. You must be a registered voter, must live in the district for 1 year immediately preceding the election. And that is it in terms of what's required for you to be a school board member. What they do, they set rules regarding the curriculum. They control the budgets. The last couple of budgets, particularly in Dallas, was over $1.5 billion. And they have the last word on hiring and firing employees, on down from the superintendent on down to the custodial staff. All right, and these are some cities that are voting in November as well. And again, you see council elections, and that's where the individual is running unopposed, and they decided not to incur that cost. There was no need for those elections. Dallas County Community College is another often how would you put it, unadvertised or a campaigned position, but highly important when it comes to just like the local school board setting the curriculum and the different type degrees and requirements for the community college. All right. And as we continue our local discussions,
before you go there, Brother Wilson, I would like to dig into those last three roles that you just mentioned. I think kind of coming out of the pandemic, we are definitely looking to having some local shakeup in the Metroplex come either November for some of these cities, but also in May of 2021. So I think it's important as we go to the polls this November, if your city is not on this list, you need to begin to have conversations and begin to do your research and prepare yourself to elect, your local representation in May. And if your city is on the ballot, you definitely need to consider, where they stood, in the last 90 days. How they responded, what did they put into place in terms of protocol. We know that each city had different responses and response time, right? You also have to kind of separate that in terms of schooling, right? For education, each school district has had a different response to COVID-19 and ensuring that students are safe, teachers are safe. So these are the small nuts and bolts that, you have to think about, and you have to connect to real time in real life and the positions and the persons that are in those roles that are making those decisions, especially in terms of virtual learning for your students or in-person learning. These are those roles that are setting, especially the school board, they're setting that precedent. They're determining those parameters that will ensure that schools are safe. I think athletes need to be involved in that. If you have athletes in your home, right? Because there's a huge push for athletics. There's a huge push for group activity. So you definitely want to dig into these races and make sure you know where these candidates stand on the things that matter most.
You are correct. You are correct, brother. And if you would just allow me personal liberty just for a few moments to jump on the soapbox real quick. I know we talk about what happens in Pennsylvania in the White House. We also talk about what may happen in the Senate or the House, and we will talk about what happens both in the Senate and the House statewide. But I want to direct you to make sure that you are, just like brother said, about the local elections, the importance of them. As a former city councilman for the city of Dallas, these races, both your school board races and your city council races, impact you in a way that the state and federal elections can't, with the speed and decisiveness that that can be enacted on a particular community is something that you need to pay attention to. So the areas or the opportunities in your community, such as parks, such as grocery stores, such as retail, transportation, even the environment, a lot of that is locally controlled by your council. Your education and your city often go hand in hand. They're married to one another. They're like the right and left ventricle of the heart. So goes one, so goes the other. So for a good, healthy city, I'll just tell you from experience, businesses look at both the education and how the city is functioning. Where your school district may be low performing, then you're less likely to entice like your Toyotas or your Hondas or your tech companies. And depending on going back and even with your universities, areas that don't have that opportunity for them to pull from an educated workforce will not see those higher end jobs and opportunities. So I encourage you to be involved in those races and know where those individuals stand on issues that are important to you, and just look around to what you see. Has it always been that way? Who's responsible for that? And those questions will often lead you back to your city council and your school board members. And that's why it's important that you pay attention to what they say, and more importantly, what they don't say. That can have an impact on you as well. So I encourage you to, again, take part in those elections. And if you don't see what you're seeing, step up and be that change that you want to see. All right. Thank you, brothers. Appreciate that.
I'm sorry, you got on your soapbox. You got me warmed up. Let me build mine over here. So let's bring it even more closer to home. The Black Lives Matter movement, Black millennials, minority millennials, we've been protesting, we've been ranting, we've been posting, we've been fact checking and everything. This is really the reason why we vote. That's the reason why we host programs like this, to really dig into, what are we really voting for, and that's what's important. We can't have a disengagement in the voting process, and no longer can we also not be well educated on what is on the ballot and what they stand for. If we're going to do any justice to the Black Lives Matter movement, I love the post that I see, vote because I can't. If we're going to do any justice to that, we're going to have to become educated voters. And we're definitely going to have to become consistent and dependable voters in local elections. Case in point, I'm repping for Dallas because that's where I'm living right now. But this happened in every city. Budgets just got approved. In the last 30 days, city budgets more than likely have been approved. There has been a lot of concern in how that budget is allocated in terms of public safety, in terms of housing, economic development, you name it, right? We did not see what we wanted. We did not see what we preferred. And we really haven't gotten justification for some of those changes and or increases to bottom lines, in certain areas that we have voiced that we don't want supported in that way fiscally, right? So your vote on the local level has to be attached to these type of exchanges between us and those that are elected to represent us, because we can no longer rest and depend on people to make decisions when they do not share our passion or our perspective. And it's easier to get through the eye of a needle than to get them to what we're trying to say when we want to move funding from one place. I'm trying to be so politically correct right now.
Yes, you are. You're doing a good job.
Funding from one place to a place where we feel resources will be better utilized. So since we can't get you to understand our passion and our perspective, we have to utilize our vote on the local level if we want to see the dollars that are coming out of our pockets. If we want to see those dollars used for the reasons that we feel are better, we're going to have to start putting people in position. There's another P word. Positions of power and power of the pen who share our perspective. So when people say, "Oh, I'm not voting. I don't believe in the process. I don't think it works." It's there, but we got to work it. The system is there, but we got to work it. So I'm excited that everybody's going to the polls for November. and they're going for a presidential race. That's exciting. I'm glad that people are understanding more about the Electoral College and how the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate play a huge card, in that game. But we have to be all around. This has to be a 360 commitment to not being a hopeless people. A voteless people is a hopeless people. We got to keep hope alive, and we got to use our vote at every election. So that's my soapbox. I'm going to break it down now.
Appreciate that.
Covered my whole topic. Thank you.
Go for it right now, bro. You got it. I'm sorry, bro. I got passion.
No, you fine. You are more than fine. And let me just add on to that, since the blaze is already going, I'm going to go throw some gas on it. The real understanding is understanding the budget. And you hit the nail on the head when you said the budget is passed. And if maybe that's a discussion that we need to have, brothers, in understanding the city budgets or different budgets and bond programs, and understanding how to get what you want and how to advocate for what you want, and to be able to influence the budget and be able to influence those bond programs. Because if left unchecked, you see what we keep getting. So at some point in time, we got to make a decision to where enough is enough, and we have to play a part in it. But we can't play a part in it unless we understand it. So maybe that's something we can discuss as we continue forward, brothers. Hopefully we can.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
So let me say this really quickly. So to you all point, right? I was talking with Tarrant County elections today in the numbers. Do you know I want everyone just throw out a percentage of how many people you think vote come May of next year? Because the election happens every year in Tarrant County in May and November. Just give me a percentage number, you guys.
10% on average, and if there's a boogeyman in the race or a boogie issue in the race, you might get 13, 14%.
Okay. That's one.
22%.
Okay. Ruben?
I don't want to answer. Well,
all right.
I feel like this is the Price is Right.
Right.
I'm gonna say, $22 and $1.
3 to 6% of the population in Tarrant County.
Wow.
3 to 6%.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible. The most important election that affects us year in and year out, because everything is local come May, right? So even though we're doing local things right now, as you see on the actual slide, come next year, we have more local people coming up because they stagger everything. So they try to do everything like the representatives and the Senate, like to have half representative, half Senate go every couple of years. They do the same exact thing. So they have every year is usually an election. In May is usually on the local. Next year is going to be specifically going to be more about propositions in November. But May of next year is the other half of, for example, the Fort Worth City Council. So it's going to be, and that's the way they do, and that affects us more than the current election.
Correct.
Let's realize that, and it is abysmal, and that's how we got to keep the fire going. I think should be something that we need to actually focus on. As a people, make sure we let everyone know that, hey, it is important to keep voting. It's important to stay engaged.
I have a question. How many votes does that? Go ahead, brother Thomas.
I was going to say along those lines, in my town, Fort Worth, if you look at the ballot this November, the only local, non-statewide races that they have on there, it's the Justice of the Peace, it's the county sheriff, and it's judicial elections. And judicial elections aren't decided on issues; they're really just judicial philosophy and party affiliation. And so all of the issues the local issues, they're being decided in May, right? And so that's something to bear in mind.
Brother Hawkins, that number disturbed me. About how many total votes would that come out to if it's 2 to 3%?
Oh, wow. I was looking at some of the outputs that's from election of 20, I want to say, I think it was 2018, I believe, no, 2019. And it was in the hundreds. Some votes were literally barely scraping 100 to like not even close to 2,000. I mean, it was really that bad. I was amazed by that. I was like, wow. Some of the proposition that were decided, it was horrible. I mean, I was like, man, these small amount of people have decided so much for people in the city of Fort Worth. It was just amazing. I was floored by it. Or in Tarrant County.
Well, I wish that you were alone in that. And Dallas is abysmal. You're talking about, particularly in your school board races, oftentimes can be decided with 1,000 votes, and that's for both candidates. So it is, or as little as under 2,500 votes. And
So
it may
I
be.
wonder,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
So I wonder what the margin that these elections are decided on. You know, if there's only in the thousands or hundreds of people turning out, I wonder how closely the final election is decided by.
That depends. Again,
Don't stress us out too early now. We got we got a couple more days of early voting, and then we'll take a break.
That depends, and it's a good question because the trend has been lately. There have been a lot of close races. Prior to that, I'm just speaking from Dallas perspective. Generally, they were blowouts. 60-40, 70-30 type races, but now it's been kind of trending. It's been 55-45, somewhere off in that area. It's been very, very tight lately. So that's a good question.
So, I mean, it sounds like, you and your own Facebook circle of friends is enough to sway an election.
Oh, easily. If you got a couple thousand followers, and if they're in your area, in your particular area of voting, then yeah, it's easily influenced. But here's the majority. Here's one of the problems that we have, and not necessarily problems, but the largest voting block are going to be your seniors. And we're still riding that wave, that silver wave tsunami of seniors for the next 10 years because of the baby boomers retiring. And then after that, there is a significant drop off in terms of voting, number of individuals voting. Just for example, the population right now with the senior citizens, Generation X, Y, and Z, are not big enough to handle the baby boomers. So it's going to be a very different look here in the next 10 years. There's going to be a shift, a major shift here in the next 10 years as those baby boomers in the next 10 years drop off the rolls, die off, and their numbers start really declining. So there's some issues that we got to really consider and look at, and how that's going to impact us.
And I would say I saw a post today just to that point, and I'll let us go on to the next set of offices. But baby boomers are voting at about, they make up about 45 to 50% of the voting block right now. So for those who don't know, millennials right now, we've made some improvement. We're kind of like 22 to 24% of the voting block, right? And then we have Generation Z right now, which is considered 18 to 29, right? They're really about maybe 4 or 5% of the voting block. So, just to kind of give some stats to how, the demographics of voters is being broken down, and why the power seems to remain in certain demographics, why our candidates continue to be over the age of 50, majorly, because that voting block is strong. It's
Correct.
solid. The value of voting is has been enforced, reinforced, applied, and reapplied. The pressure is on. So us other generations, we need to find that same energy. We need to find it. I don't know where it's at, but we need to find it. Because obviously it works in some regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the numbers in terms of population of the country, in terms of, are there more baby boomers than, millennials, like what those numbers are. But, as it is a changing of the guard season, millennials, if we want to see what we want, definitely put your name in the race, and run for something and get that voting block behind you. Yeah, so that's my tidbit.
All right. That's a good tidbit. Good soapbox too. All right. Moving on. So our county offices. So we'll talk a little bit about our constables, justice of the peace, county commissioners, county judge, county court of law, county attorney, and that ever loving, popular individual, the county tax assessor and collector, and then sheriff. So we'll briefly go through these individuals. Depending on where you live, you may or may not have this race, or they may be uncontested. Oftentimes these are based on party affiliation, and just depends on if the other party decides to throw their name in the hat and make it a contested race. All right, the constables. The constables are 4-year terms, serves as a licensed peace officer, and performs various law enforcement functions, including issuing traffic citations, serves warrants and civil papers such as subpoenas and temporary restraining orders. Serves as a bailiff for justice of the peace courts. All right, sheriff. Depending on your sheriff serves 4-year terms, serves as a licensed peace officer, and is responsible for enforcing the criminal laws of the state, manages and operates the county's jail, provides security for courts, serves warrants and subpoena civil papers, regulates bail bondsmen in counties with no bail bond board, may serve as a Texas assessors collectors in counties with fewer than 8,000 residents. Okay. Do believe, if I'm correct, there were still demonstrations going on about no bail, and how that process is being, how it impacts individuals that can't pay their bail for a minor infraction, but are basically processed twice for a crime that they may have committed. And that continues to be an individual, a sore spot, I know particularly in Dallas. So your sheriff is the one who would actually deal with it. That office and the county commissioners would have influence over that. And that concludes the presentation, my brother. Is there anything else that we would like to say? Are there any questions in the chat?
So, I'll just add this regarding the sheriff. So, I didn't know this, but somebody shared with me that the sheriff has the ability also to enter into contracts on behalf of their county. So I didn't know that. They also have the ability to do things like ask that their deputies serve as basically on behalf of ICE. So that's an issue that may be of particular interest to folks in this county, depending on what their perspective is. So those are, I think, some interesting powers that I didn't know about the sheriff until recently.
That's good. All right, brothers. I will stop sharing.
So, yeah.
All right.
I'm not seeing any question in the chat at this time, but I did enjoy the conversation earlier because we wanted to talk about, right now we're in the middle of early voting season. We're getting toward the end of this whole voter education, voter registration, now voter education. And now we're in action mode right now. So I know a lot of people were asking, after November 3rd, results come out, however they may come, the question is, what do we do next? So it's obvious, I think we have some actionable items, some things we could talk about. So if you had any suggestions, on how we can continue to harness this energy that we have going on right now as we move past the election in 2020 and go into the next season.
That is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brother Wilson. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how much time do we have? Because there's a lot of ways you can go in that in terms of from advocacy to lobbying to holding. As soon as you find out who won that race, getting in contact with them and holding their feet to the fire. And every candidate has one of those questionnaires they filled out and said that, hey, if you elect me, I will do this. That is where you hold that back up and say, hey, you agreed to do this, this, and this. How are we going to get this done? And that is the piece that oftentimes we forget, because once we elect a person, okay, well, we got it. Let me just tell you this. No, they don't have it. No, don't give them that power. Don't give them carte blanche ability to be able to go out and do. Don't let them tell you, don't you worry about it. I'll go downtown. I'll take care of it for you. You just leave it up to me. No. You hold their feet to the fire. You make sure they're still coming into your community. You make sure they're still talking to your organizations. You make sure they still know you, and you make sure they're still carrying out what they said that they're going to do, because they're banking on you and counting on you, especially if they've been in there for a while. They're banking on you forgetting. They're banking on you going back to your normal routine in life and forgetting about them and allowing them to be able to do what they're going to do, which is oftentimes not in your best interest.
They need to feel the pressure to know that they can be replaced, and that's where we're missing, or we're dropping the ball. If they don't feel that pressure, they will not act. I think what you're saying is power concedes to nothing but power, right? So if they don't feel like they have the power, and you guys gonna go back and do complain about it, and I come see you guys in 4, 6, 2 years, whatever my term is, then I'll see you in about a year and a half, 2.5 years, 3.5 years. You'll see me then, and I'll make more promises to you. No, hold them to the fire. Let them know they can be replaced.
And the church said, "Amen."
There is one website. If you want to look for a representative for the state of Texas, it's called Indivisible Austin. And from there, you look up. You can, if you don't know who your representative is, well, I think more than one. Who, you know who they are or who's representing you. You can put your information in, and you can find out who's representing you. It also lists, of course, the national representatives, also the local representatives as well. Let's call it Indivisible Austin.
Individual Austin.
I want to throw a curveball. So how do we feel about the relationship or the steps to building a relationship with your representative? Like, how do you go about that? Because we can say, yeah, get in contact with your representative, but most times people will assume that, oh, they're busy, they got staffers, they got all of this Olivia Pope situation going on, and if we're going to hold them accountable, I think people want to feel comfortable and valued that if I call or I email, that I'm going to get a response. So, like, what are some tips, in terms of how to build that relationship, how to curate, that's a different word, curate that relationship, especially as we kind of also move into a policy season?
Let me just say this, and Brother Hawkins, you said it correctly. Power understands power. And as an individual, you're calling your representatives, you want to speak with them. Guarantee you, I can almost bet from the local to the national level, when they ask you for your name and your address, is not because they necessarily want to put you on their voters list. They may want to, but one of the first things they're going to do is look up your voting record to see if you vote. And then 2, they're going to listen to who are you. And if you're just an individual, they're going to weigh, okay, well, how much influence do you have? Because if you're calling on behalf of an organization, that's going back to your question, Brother Ruben. If you're part of an organization, guess what elected officials understands? Votes. So if you represent an organization and that has numbers, they're going to listen to you. That's just as valuable as campaign contributions to an elected official. So organize organizations that have your interest or your views that you're trying to push. Be part of those organizations and communicate that with your representative. That's how you influence, and that goes back to your point of holding them accountable and how you begin to do that. So if you're involved in an organization, then you all should have, and if you have numbers, whether it's 15, because I tell you what's music to an elected official ears is if you say that your HOA or any type of organization that they know has numbers, those are potential voters and they want to listen to what you have to say.
That's good. That sounds like our current get out the vote strategy, arrive with 5, but don't go alone. That's what it sounds like. Don't go alone. We really have to find, those thresholds of common values and common purpose, to really establish those relationships and make them meaningful.
Another place is, aside from your, just reaching out to your representatives, there are also a lot of community forums that you can take part in. So there's, of course, the city council meetings. In light of all of the activity with George Floyd and the like, there's a lot of community policing forums, right? These are opportunities for you to go speak to your police chief and taking advantage of those opportunities, especially in mass, right? A group of people, you all voicing the same concern, the same things that you want to have addressed, and the same proposed solution. That's impactful, right? And it's places where they know that those handful of people that show up in May, those are the forums that those people are paying attention to, right? And so those are excellent places to let your voice be heard and make your voice be impactful beyond just your immediate circle.
And while we're on this topic, I guess I'm thinking about just being involved in a civic or a service organization is really important. There's a lot that we can look to these representatives for in terms of accountability and responsibility for what they're elected to manage. But philanthropy is real. The world is pretty much run on philanthropy. So if you can find an organization that shares your values, whether it's super civic involved or if it's more community service oriented, don't just put your treasure on the table, put your time and your talent on the table and, really just kind of add some value to some spaces as they actually touch people. Because until we can get policy change, we have to continue to touch people, in every way possible.
Yes, and that speaks to being organized, because I'll tell you, senior citizens, whatever group they are, they're organized. Homeless, they're organized. Environmental, every aspect of it, from the tree huggers to the land lovers, the water appreciate, yes, fish, down to butterflies. They're organized. And the biggest thing is they're organized. And they come with a message, they come with an idea, a goal that they're trying to protect or want to improve something. So going back to your question, what do we need to do? Attach yourself, like what you were saying, attach yourself to an organization that shares your value. Be active in it, whether you want to be up front or you want to be in behind the scenes, but do something. There's enough, I always say, there's enough problems for you to be attached to something. And there's something that you are displeased with. And I promise you, there's an organization that does not like it, whether it's from potholes to trash pickup to clean air. Some organization is willing to fight for that cause.
Yeah. So I know policy is something that's really, really big. So, what policies have any of you brothers heard that, we should start to research and really just kind of familiarize ourselves with in terms of holding, these soon to be elected officials accountable?
I'm really glad you brought that up, Brother Leo. There's one that is kind of making its way around the country, which is the 8 Can't Wait police reform, I guess, policy suggestions. It's a set of 8 policy changes that you could request for your local police to make. Things like banning chokeholds and the like. And you can find more information on that at 8cantwait.org. There's the Crown Act, right? That's a bill that has been suggested locally in a number of different locales, which is it's a set of policy prescriptions against discrimination on the way that people wear their hair. There's at the national level, there's the George Floyd bill and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Both being considered at the national level.
There's a local level for the George Floyd Act
Yeah.
as well. The bill for the George, the local version, state version of that as well.
Am I correct? Did I hear something about Sandra Bland? Maybe in this possible upcoming state session? Was there some discussion about that? I thought I heard something about that.
So I hadn't heard anything to that effect, but that doesn't mean it's not so. I guess it'd be good to do some research and find out a little bit more about that.
One thing it might not cover policies, but I do want to go back really quickly. In terms of the people who are running for next time, for May, for example, you can go to the Secretary of State website. So they have literally on their website, they have listed all the various people who are running for various offices and when they're up for election, when they're signing their papers. So you can tell when's their turn, when's their next term coming up. So that way you kind of know who is next on the ballot. Typically, in some county election boards, it kind of comes depending on how busy they are. They don't really have a complete service level agreement, technical term, SLA, as to when they actually place candidate information on there. So Secretary of State, the website is a place you go until your county offices actually list like their sample ballots, for example.
That just goes to us, really beginning to have a culture of being educated voters. It's going to take work. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take continued efforts like this to just push the conversation forward, and everybody has to be an ambassador. I actually have heard friends who've had disturbing conversations, just, small talk about who's voting for who and why they're voting for them. And did they really look at their campaign website? Do they really know, what their response is on a particular issue? So all of these resources that we're providing, Google them and just get a start and stumble across, these websites and just read, don't read all at once, but just please begin to read and familiarize yourself. And I think that's going to be really, really important, for us moving forward, especially post the pandemic. I think it's just really important. Regardless of the presidential race, we have to think about really who is in these positions of power for the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to be really, really important because there's no longer going back. This is not back to the future. This is new normal, and it's still changing. I guess we could kick it back to you, Brother Jannard.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to make sure I got all the comments here, especially with the policy changes. I wanted to make sure I got them here. That way, for those who are not familiar with some of the advocacy and the bills that we were talking about, I want to make sure we get that information. But yeah, that will kind of bring us close to the end of our show. I don't see that we have any specific questions for us tonight. So at this we can just kind of go into the wrap up session and just what will be your, we can go around the room, you know, what are your final remarks to our governing bodies as well as those who are listening on today. So I'll start with you, Brother Wilson. Final words to our listeners today.
All right, final word, vote, no, go vote, no, and go vote. Be an educated voter. Every time there's a poll that's open, go vote. Take 5 registered voters, and then after you vote, go register 5 more and challenge them to go register some other people and to take them to the polls. Because in essence, your voice is your vote. If you don't exercise it, you can't complain. One of the most disheartening statements I hear during voter registration, either my vote doesn't count or that's why I don't vote because of the type of person who's in office. Well, by you not voting, then you just co-signed on that person. You just allowed that person to be in. You didn't have a say-so in that. And even if your candidate doesn't win, you voiced your opinion. Let it be known that this is what you stand for. So I encourage each and every individual to go and make sure that everyone in your house is registered to vote, and you take them, force them to vote. We often, you hear on Sunday morning that you can't get into heaven off of Big Mama's prayers. Well, guess what? You can't make the change off of Big Mama voting. It takes you and Big Mama to vote to make the change that you want to see and to improve your community and get individuals in office that represent you. So I say vote, no, and vote.
Vote, no, and vote. All right. Brother Thomas, you have the floor. Final words.
And I think that sums it up. Just vote, vote, vote. There's nothing more to say.
All right, Brother Hawkins.
So, as you know, we've gone through the different versions of voting, right? Registration, education. Now we're getting ready to participate. So let's keep repeating this cycle. Let's keep going. As we say, as we vote, educate yourselves, and just keep repeating that cycle. Wash, rinse, repeat, and let's get a more educated workforce. Voting for.
Brother Reuben.
I like what you said, educated workforce and voting force. We need both. Because there's a lot of people making money who not out there going to the polls. They're just making their money. And legitimately, especially the races that we talked about tonight, they hit close to home. They hit your household quicker than anything else. The school board, the city councilman, the mayor's race, the sheriff's department, the justice of the peace, they hit your home quicker than the law allows. So this is life or death. This is not a test. It's not at all. Think about your children. Think about the children you don't have yet. And think about the world that you want them to grow up in. That decision starts now. We thought we had 5 years, 10 more years to think about it and just kind of wait. We don't. We're actually already behind. So please don't wait any longer. Please take advantage of early voting going on right now until October 30th. And then please, if you don't get a chance to do that, go to the polls on November 3rd. And why is this life or death? Because a gun right now is aimed at the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for Black and brown people in this country. So please don't take this lightly. Don't make it just a symbolic, thing. Make it truly your confession and your commitment to living the best life you can, right? This vote has everything to do with the quality of life that you're going to live from now until whenever the Lord cracks the sky. So please, whatever you do, vote. Don't vote alone, and continue to keep the energy alive.
Amen.
Amen for this. I mean, I don't think I could say that any better than my colleagues on the panel have already said. My biggest thing, of course, voting. Your voice is necessary. Your voice can be heard. Your vote is your voice. I think a lot of look for, you know, that beacon, that leader to say, hey, this is what we're going to do to help us organize. We don't really have the Martin Luther Kings, the MLKs of today. But I think change, and what I found going through this whole process with you guys, is that we can affect change at home. Start by affecting the people that are the closest to you. Ask those people those types of questions. You know, you can get into those discussions and healthy debates about who you're voting for, why you're voting, why you're not voting. I know we tend to, try to do separation of church and state. We don't like talking politics at work. We don't do all these things, but some of the education piece and some of the awareness starts with the conversation. You know, just talking to people. Have you registered to vote? Many of my colleagues and friends, they've already registered, they voted, they know their civic duty, but then there's a small percentage that I just didn't know what to do. And then that's where we step in and say, hey, I got what you need. Go do X, Y, and Z. You know, matter of fact, let me take you to the polls with me. So I think it's about impacting our communities one person at a time, and we need to start with the people that are closest to us. And I think that's how we start to affect change slowly but surely.
And to your point, you know, we look for leaders. Major change doesn't happen based off of a leader. It does not. It has never, ever in history happened that way. You know, we look at the civil rights movement. Yeah, we have our leaders of the civil rights movement, right? But the groundswell support of things that happened, the bill itself was not because of leaders. It was a groundswell of support and a number of people, a sheer amount of people who wanted that change to occur. So we keep looking for leaders, and you put to look within yourselves, because it's really up to the masses, not up to a leader.
Agreed. All right. Well, with that being said, I want to thank you, brothers, again for volunteering and participating with this voter education awareness. Know your poll. I'm sorry, know your ballot, part 1, 2, and 3. For those of you who are out there, I appreciate you guys coming back to listen to these tips that these brothers have been offering for the past 3 weeks. We hope that you have used this time to educate yourselves. I know I have. I've learned quite a bit of stuff by sitting here and paying attention, or just using some of these sites to Google and help my understanding when I'm going to the polls, so I can speak intelligently and know who I'm voting for. Because, you know, growing up, we would just automatically a certain Democratic Party or Republican Party, and we just went in there and voted, straight ticket, call it a day. You know, we're not living in that space anymore. So I definitely want to appreciate you guys for joining in on the conversation. I want to appreciate our guests that have been on for the past 7 weeks. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our show for today, and we will see y'all when we see y'all next time. All right. Thank you, brothers. Thank you, guests.
Thank you, brother.